All right, America, it's time for me to speak out, okay? This is for all you fucking oppressors: Rachel, Debo, Professor Gary Gregg, Dean Martis, Pharaoh Ramses, Mayor Fisher, with all the Fishervilles around here. Karl Marx's 1848 revolutions. We can learn from the 1848 revolutions in Europe, the so-called Springtime of Nations. Karl Marx wrote his book, The Communist Manifesto, and then 50 countries rose up in revolution, but they failed. The 1848 revolutions failed. They failed because they didn't come about any structural changes. The reason why they didn't come about any structural changes is because the revolution itself had failed. And one of the reasons, there's like 5 main reasons, but one of the main reasons was that the middle class, intellectual, ivory tower elites, with their lofty, privileged, stuck-up arrogance, weren't able to convince the peasants to join the revolution. And so actually what ended up happening is the peasants ended up fighting in the king's militia in order to subdue the rebelling off-white European peoples. This makes me think of the class differences in America. Samantha Bee did a report on Jon Stewart where she showed Zuccotti Park. So you got the Occupy movement, you got the new liberal hippie class emerging. And even within the liberal hippie class, you have class distinctions. You had the upper middle class people with the nice fancy tents, and then you had the poor people who, had less. And they were living in 2 different spots, so there was a class distinction. There's lots of class distinctions. We got the ultra rich, the super rich, the regular rich, the middle class, the working poor, the idle poor, and the homeless. So I think that was like 7 or 8. And just to show you a key difference, like the homeless, when they look at snow, that means it's going to be cold. That's a symbol. Actually, some homeless like the snow because they can pack it up around their tent and it insulates them. But if you don't have a tent, then snow represents that it's going to be, your living conditions are going to be colder and you're going to be more miserable. So when middle class Americans happily await for some snow, and they're like, ooh, I can't wait for some snow. I mean, just so they could go ahead and sled ride for an hour, probably less, and then they'll cry over the cold, how cold it is. And then they'll come in, they'll get themselves some hot chocolate and put on their little pink, fuzzy bunny slippers while sitting on their lazy boy chair watching some football game on the big screen TV. So they look at snow totally different. Meanwhile, while they're watching TV on the big screen TV, drinking hot chocolate, Tom, the homeless guy, he just lost his pinky toe to frostbite. And he's been afflicted with hypothermia, and he's got this constant chill that his body could just never get rid of, no matter how many pieces of cardboard he can wrap around himself. So I think being aware of class differences is important. Is important to know, just so you're aware of your surroundings. So you're not like Marie Antoinette, just saying let them eat cake while you're going around having this big, elaborate, privileged royal party. It's not like that for everybody out here. So keep it on the down low. I'm sure you're allowed to have fun, but shit, you gotta rub it in poor people's faces. And it's kind of weird that we even have homeless people. In Louisville, we got 10,000 homeless. But that's because we live in an industrial. It's weird because we live in an industrial society. We've lived in an industrial society for over 100 years now. In 1908, Jack London, who's the author of White Fang and The Call of the Wild, where you had a domesticated dog named Buck. He had to learn to trust his natural instincts in order to survive in the Klondike, Alaskan gold rush. So in order to survive as a sled dog, he had to tap into his natural instincts, whereas his domesticated teaching actually steered him wrong and made him a wimp out there in the cold. So here's what Jack London said about capitalism in 1908 in his book called The Iron Heel. in the Iron Hills about a violent socialist revolution that happens in America. And it's kind of amazing that his words from over 100 years ago eerily sound like the America that we live in today. So in America, you can have 5 people who can produce bread for 1,000. One man can produce cotton cloth for 250 people, woolens for 300, and boots and shoes for 1,000. And one would conclude that from this, under a capable management of society, modern civilized man would be a great deal better off than the caveman. But is he? Well, let's see. In the United States today, there are 15 million people living in poverty. And by poverty, that's meant the condition of life in which, through lack of food and adequate shelter, the mere standard of working efficiency cannot be maintained. In the United States today, in spite of all your so-called labor legislation, there are 3 million of child laborers. In 12 years, their numbers have doubled. If modern man's producing power is 1,000 times greater than that of the caveman, then why in the United States today are there 15 million people who are not properly sheltered and properly fed? Why then in the United States today are there 3 million child laborers? It is a true indictment. The capital class has mismanaged. In the face of the facts that modern man lives more wretchedly than the caveman, and that his producing power is 1,000 times greater than that of the caveman, no other conclusion is possible than that the capitalist class has mismanaged. And that you, capitalists, have mismanaged, my masters. You have criminally and selfishly mismanaged. And on this count, you cannot answer me here tonight, face to face, any more than your whole class can answer the 1.5 million of revolutionaries in the United States. You cannot answer. You have failed in your management. You have made a shambles of civilization. You have been blind and greedy. You have risen up as you today rise up shamelessly in our legislative halls. And then you declare that profits were impossible without the toil of children and babes. Don't take my word for it. It's all on the records against you. You've lulled your consciences to sleep with prattle of sweet ideals and dear moralities. You're fat with power and possession, drunken with success, and you have no more hope against us than the drones clustered about the honey vats, than the worker bees spring upon them to end their rotund existence. You failed in your management of society. Your management shall be taken away from you. 1.5 million of the men of the working class say that they're going to get the rest of the working class to join them and take the management away from you. And that's revolution, my masters. Stop it if you can. And as for you, he went on, Ernest Everhard went on, turning towards Colonel Van Gilbert, you have replied to nothing I have said. You have merely made a few excited and dogmatic assertions about my mental caliber, and that may serve you in your business. But you can't talk to me like that. I'm not a working man, capping my hand, asking you to increase my wages or to protect me from the machine at which I work. You cannot be dogmatic with truth when you deal with me, save for dealing with your wage slaves and your tenants and your other dick-licking Uncle Tom pieces of shit. They will not dare reply to you because you hold their bread and butter, their lives in your hands. I, on the other hand, have no such limitations. I'm a socialist revolutionary. Working men of the world, it's time to unite. I think the Declaration of Independence is a good document. Gives us a clear vision of what we need to do when the capitalist classes, the elites, the government has mismanaged. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth a separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. So we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, and that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, and that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying in its foundations on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experiences have shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for a redress in the most humble terms, and our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the royal ruler of a free people. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies and the right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved, and that as free and independent states, that we have the full power to levy war, to conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with the firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortune, and our sacred honor. So that's the word of our founding fathers. So the capitalist class has mismanaged, and now it's time to go Thomas Jefferson on our government. Peace, not war. All right.